say, I mean, New Orleans is a special place, and it's not, I would say that not because I was born and raised here, but it took leaving to understand that. And they say adversity doesn't build character, it defines it. And I think the character of the people and the city of New Orleans is unwavering. And so for me, being a part of that gives me, the optimism that I have for the future of this city.
So what makes me hopeful about the future of New Orleans is the fact that it's a proactively built culture, that we created this ourselves over the course of many, many generations. And those of us that are here and continue to stay here and continue to want to live here and want to be a part of the future have an active hand in continuing to build that culture and to make it what it is, and to build it into our own version, our own manifestation of the culture that we receive from our friends or our family or from our parents over the many, many years, or in some cases centuries, that we've all been here.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of this place because I feel and see so many people build community in a way that I haven't experienced anywhere else. And I think that devotion and dedication to each other and to our collective culture and unique histories that we share with so many other places around the world is important to the people who are here. And so that is why, despite the eroding coastline, despite infrastructural problems, despite all of the myriad of issues with our federal government currently, I am optimistic that this community will stick together.
New Orleans is replete with inspiration, visually, culturally, historically. If we can figure out who New Orleans is for, we're going to be fine.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of the city because we have endured so much, and that gives me hope that we can turn this situation around.
Well, I think that Mardi Gras is a very appealing event, and it appeals to a lot of outsiders as well as the people that live in the city. So I don't really anticipate a significant loss of interest in Mardi Gras in the years to come, probably even a gained interest in Mardi Gras as the exposure of the city continues to be expanded through large events coming to town like the Super Bowl, like WrestleMania, which again is another reason why I really believe in the future of the city, because New Orleans is a unique city in that it is a very walkable city when you have large events like the Super Bowl, like WrestleMania. So when you have visitors coming to town, you can set up your fan experiences, your connected events around the city, and it's not going to be difficult for people to get around, so you're going to be able to have them experience the city to its fullest potential.
I am very optimistic about the long-term future of New Orleans because I work very closely with the people that are in charge of determining that future, and I'm aware of all the work that they put in. We've made significant strides with housing, as well as we just have a real devotion to the city and the people who reside within it.
Well, I think when you look at us as a city, we've gone through a lot, and we keep managing to overcome, and there's a real passion to do that. And I think that's because it's one of the most wonderful, unique cities in the country, really in the world, and I think that there's a real groundswell of love and support for this city that's worth fighting for. And that's never going to change. I think that whatever happens, we're going to get through it, and we're going to come out better than ever on the other side.
I think what makes you optimistic about the longevity or the long-term effect of being in New Orleans is just the fact that it's so optimistic. and then like all the people here are like generally optimistic. Like we could go through, I don't know, 500 hurricanes and like a bunch of other like sad shit, and still like feel like we're on top of the world at the same time. I think that's why like I'll come to love living out here, because I grew up north in Philadelphia, but in Philadelphia it was like they have a lot of similar and differences. One of the main differences is like being in Philly is not as optimistic, whereas being down here you feel the optimism, which is like it's pretty awesome, pretty tight, and you feel like a sense of community. And I don't think you get community in a lot of other places, but I feel like you don't get that same feel of community anywhere other than like here. Yeah, I think that's what's going to keep it going for a really long time. I think that and the roaches are going to survive.
I'm optimistic about the future of this city because of its past. And its past has been about resiliency through all kinds of difficulties from the day it was founded, certainly not since it was even part of the native culture of this city. But people have been resilient here, and no matter what the challenges are, individuals here find a way, and the individuals make the community, and this truly is a very knit together community. And that makes me optimistic that no matter what the future challenges are, we will smile, we will find a way to solve it.
People want to live in New Orleans. They've always wanted to live here. It's fun, it's different, and although times get tough, we always find a way to make it work. New Orleans has been here since before this country existed, and in my view, we're going to be here forever.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of this place. Before I answer, I want to lead off with this. I'm always intrigued by the notion that New Orleans is this geologic mystery. In case you didn't know, 4,000 years ago, New Orleans wasn't even here. And starting in like 2200 BC, the Mississippi River started spitting out this sediment. And over the course of a few thousand years, we started to become tangible. It's funny, the clearest metaphor that intrigues me is that our parking lots are shells, right? Because we don't have any rocks, because rocks are too heavy to make it all the way down the river. We're literally sand. One of the tangibles I'll talk about too, and I only say it once, don't make me say it again, is this idea of that we are indeed resilient. And I only say it because I heard this metaphor that was fantastic. This idea that a boxer is resilient in a sense that they train to be hit while surviving and thriving. They don't train to never get hit because they would be doomed. So, abs, crunch, crunch, crunch. The whole point is to be able to accept these hits while you're thriving. And I feel we do it the same way, whether we're building levees or we're spending $14 billion in surge gates and more protection, or then we realize we start to innovate and say, well, it's got to be a both and. So we start to understand how we can live with this water at the same time. I love that we're having this conversation through tangentially with Venice, which seems to also have its own personal narrative with water, similar to ours. Some of the intangibles I wanted to talk about is this notion of radical hospitality. I feel like is emblematic of this city. It's a notion that's grounded in biblical history, but Saint Benedict preached it. French philosopher Jacques Derrida did this idea of radical welcoming, and it's emblematic. And I guess what we call our cultural trinity, not our food one. Although that's a fantastic one too, but this idea of music, food, and architecture, the fact that none of these things are experienced in a vacuum, but they're celebrated, like food, from crawfish boils, an obvious one, the whole notion of the king cake, that little fat baby in there, whoever gets the slice with the baby in it, actually has to buy the cake for the next community event, right? It's not in this vacuum. So it seems like our underpinnings. I love that we're this apparition of sediment, right? That was that's temporal, and so we're grounded in this temporal notion equally as community. But it's where our strength comes from. It's what makes us concrete.
Optimistic is a strong word. I don't know if it's so much optimistic as what other options do we have. My family has been here for God knows how long, and I can't imagine life anywhere else. And so, I mean, you have to be optimistic, I guess, because what's the other option? You're going to stick your head in the sand and doom scroll all day? That's not exactly an option. So I am optimistic out of necessity.
I think New Orleans is a place that's rich in history, culture, music, but it's really the people that set it apart. New Orleans is not just a place for locals, but for visitors. We're really America's backyard. So to be able to spend time in this beautiful city, but also share it with the world, will keep those stories and memories and history alive.
I guess, history of culture with music and art, I think that's the base of our community, and we have diverse communities. I think that's the reason I'm optimistic.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of New Orleans because the people in New Orleans have learned over centuries how to persevere. It's something we're good at. So I think we will figure things out and figure out how to extend the life of the city in spite of the challenges that we face, particularly climate challenges.
I'm optimistic because we have the answer to saving our coast in the mighty Mississippi River. All the sediment in the bottom of that river could be used to build back land to lower storm surge every year to coastal Louisiana and deepen the river, increasing trade for those larger ships going up the Mississippi River that bring goods from all over the world. So you get double the benefit by taking that sediment and building land, lowering storm surge to our coast, thus lowering insurance and allowing us to live our life out along the coast of Louisiana. It makes too much common sense not to do it.
I'm optimistic about the future of New Orleans because there's too much history, too much wealth of knowledge to be lost. There's a lot of good people here who want to make sure that this city and its culture remains here, or at least thrives in its place. And we have a wealth of knowledge that beyond anywhere else, I believe, will be able to save this place.
You're talking to someone who co-founded and chaired the New Orleans Proud to Call It Home campaign back in the early 90s. But I actually am optimistic in this way that had the horrible Katrina, Rita flooding and whatnot not happened, we wouldn't be as far ahead as we are now. So imagine that had that never happened, we'd be just sitting here kind of oblivious and potentially really near even grander disaster than that. So because of that, we've gotten to attack that problem. And when you had everybody in this city and the country coming to help, and the Women and Storm Citizens, for one, everybody, levee boards, I mean, we were working on boring problems and we tuned into this problem. And so we're doing it in fits and starts. We're in a fit, not a start right now, but we've done a lot of work, and at least we understand what needs to be done. So that is why I'm optimistic, because I think we're a little ahead in that way. I also don't think America really wants an America without a New Orleans. And so not everyone loves us, but a lot of people do, and they get it, and they have helped, and we are absurdly resilient. So I feel good about that, and I sure hope that we make it, because I do think that New Orleans has figured something out that I don't know that the rest of the world has, and that is that life is meant to be lived, not endured. And so we bring something to America and the world that's not the same everywhere. I think Venice might be a little like us in that way. So I am optimistic. I have sat in my office on the second floor wondering what I needed to ensure. But I am optimistic, and I think we've got a better shot at it than those folks because we finally focused on it. And dang it, we're worth saving for the world.
I think just because I'm a New Orleanian, I'm optimistic, right? Especially about like where I'm from. But I think that there's a spirit of New Orleans, right? And it's maybe the physical, when you're talking about the physical aspect and then like, you know, like the waters and losing the land and all that type of stuff. I think that maybe there is a lot of reality in that, a harsh reality in that. But I think at the end of the day, there's a spirit of New Orleans that was here 300 years ago, right? But there was also, I think the spirit is like a descendant of this African culture, this European culture, cultures mixing and collaging and then coming here and then forming this new culture, right? And then I think that culture, spirit, whether it's in the South, in the city of the physical location of New Orleans, or if it's somewhere else, I think that spirit is going to stand because it's something that's in the people. It's going to be in their kids and their kids to go on and so on and so forth. As long as the people stand and as long as the spirit stands, and you know, there's something to be optimistic about.
New Orleans is an incredibly special and unique place that brims with authenticity. We like to think about the vibe of a city being what you see through a window when you walk down the street in the evening, and what it conveys organically to anyone who comes through. And that uniqueness, that authenticity, that sense of creativity is incredibly exciting and breeds innovation. And that's a big part of what makes me excited about the future of New Orleans.
I'm really excited about the strides that we've made in affordable housing and making sure that every New Orleanian can stay in the city of New Orleans. We've done that through various zoning rules. We've done it with a new housing trust fund. So I'm really optimistic in the state of housing in New Orleans to make sure that our people can stay housed in safe, affordable housing right here in the city of New Orleans.
I'm optimistic because the cultural reverberations of New Orleans are felt around the US and around the world. When I go abroad, I tell people I'm from New Orleans, and almost always people recognize that city and they ask me about Louis Armstrong. Venice is interesting in relation to New Orleans because we're both water cities, and we need to be more and will be more of a water city in 100 years than we are now by necessity because our rainfall is so great. So even if sea level rise is not a major detriment to the future of New Orleans, the fact that our rainstorms are so intense means that we can't pump out all the water. We have to find places for it to live in the city while we're living here. And then eventually the water level goes down. So you'll be seeing in 100 years a lot more boats and a lot more boat traffic in New Orleans. It'll be like Venice or Amsterdam or Zhuchao in China.
I think I'm more optimistic about the fact that people are willing to help each other more since like past probably like 10 years or so, it has been really good in the city. But now that people have like more perspective on how things are now, it's like very helpful that people are willing to come together as a community.
New Orleans is the only city that I'm aware of that has its own culture, its own music, its own food. It's unique amongst ourselves. And even when you travel from neighborhood to neighborhood, there's variations in all three of those areas, including speech. We talk a little bit different depending on where you grew up and where you end up. Optimistically, when I consider the history of New Orleans as the fourth largest city at the turn of the century, gives me optimism that we can continue because of our uniqueness that needs to be preserved and carried on. And our architecture actually is part and parcel of all those other things that make New Orleans really unique amongst itself.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of New Orleans because we have the best, the brightest, the most creative, but especially the most dedicated people to this place and making New Orleans all that it can be. And we're not going anywhere.
optimistic about the long-term future of New Orleans because this community has always and continually come together for each other in ways that I could never imagine. So since I've moved here, I've encountered, COVID, a natural disaster, and every time I'm marveled by how the community shows up for each other, how everyone navigates what could be considered a disaster, but navigates and shows up for each other in different ways that haven't seen in other cities. Not to say that it doesn't happen there, but here it is. I've experienced it firsthand from having my own disaster. I had a fire at my house. The way in which this community showed up for me was, I would have never imagined. Just people from my gym to, supermarket or whatever else. They're like, oh yeah, you're gonna be all right, man. We're gonna get through this. Hope you're doing okay in your house. I gave to the fund, or whatever. A lot of people just showed up because, in the work that I do, it's just driven by changing the ecosystem. And that only happens with everyone working with each other, whether it be through the restaurants, nonprofits. Everyone is always going to come up with a solution that benefits us all. So I'm optimistic because, there's no community like this anywhere.
We live on a thing called the New Madras Fault here. It's called the Mississippi River, at the center of New Madras. And so everything is going to change because all plates are slowly adapting around the world. And I believe that here or in another place, we will build new worlds because we believe we can do that.
I'm not optimistic about the very long-term future of this place, but I am optimistic about what the knowledge of that long-term future is doing to the city today. The way it has focused people on questions of how to live in the most productive and sustainable manner, how to make clear-eyed choices about their communities, and how to live without fantasies that I think many other major cities, particularly coastal cities, share about the future. I think living in New Orleans, one is forced to be alert and, if anything, hyper-conscious of the risks, the real risks that we face. And I find that kind of honesty refreshing. I think it informs the life of the city, the culture of the city. And I think it has always been that way. In New Orleans, not related necessarily to climate risks or even hurricane risks, but this is a city that has faced existential crisis routinely for more than 300 years now. And I think that has armed the people of the city with a kind of sense of what it means to live, what it means to be alive. Here, it focuses one on the things one can control, and I think it forces you to think more carefully about what values you want to preserve amidst all of the deterioration that we're now thrust into. So I think New Orleans actually has a major advantage over many other cities in similar situations. And it's why I couldn't imagine living anywhere else.
I would say I'm optimistic about the future of our city because having lived here my whole life, I've seen us constantly reinvent ourselves while staying true to our culture and our sense of community. And I would say that just continues to affirm me, and it continues to show me why we're unique and how we have the resilience to keep moving forward. And that lets me know that we're gonna be all right.
So for me, it's all about sustainability.
It's the work that I do, and it's what I love about the city of New Orleans. All the initiatives that are in place, from the city of New Orleans being a lead for city, the work that I do is in that field, and so I'm really optimistic about the future and all the sustainable initiatives that the city is taking on, the projects that are going after green building certifications, from the New Orleans Convention Center to universities, and so it's been fun to be part of that, and I continue to lean into that as much as I can. And for me, it's all about accelerating human sustainability, evolving culture, community, and the built environment.
I'm optimistic about the future of this place because, I believe in New Orleans. I believe that we could stop the violence. I believe that, we could stop the crime. And, I have faith in my people. It's just only if we have faith in ourselves. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But, New Orleans is, the best city to be in. There's no city like New Orleans, we have the best culture, we have the best food, we got the best music. Who don't love jazz? Come on now. Who don't love gumbo? Come on. So yeah, that's what I'm optimistic about my city, because we're different and we try to be better, but just I don't know why we are not growing as a community, but I guess we're trying somehow, some way we can make it.
The things that are wrong about New Orleans can be fixed. And I think a lot of them are being fixed. The things that are right about New Orleans are things that other communities could never create. We live in a time where it seems to me that things are getting more and more generic, and New Orleans refuses to be generic, and that's something that I know attracts not only me but a lot of other folks to this area. New Orleans refuses to be generic. The other reason I have a great deal of optimism is that in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a very noticeable shift in meaningful engagement of the youth of the city. There have been a lot of programs that have germinated in that period of time. We're beginning to see some of the effects of those. In order for us to be a world-class city, we need to have all of our citizens participating in the community. And that can only happen if we're giving our youth all the tools and education that they need in order to do that. So I get a sense that that really is happening. It's not an empty promise or a platitude. And that gives me a great deal of optimism for the future of the city.
I'm optimistic about New Orleans because neighbors still care about their Blacks. I've been in New Orleans for 13 years. We moved to Gentilly about 5 years ago. The established pre-Katrina families watch out for everyone. My neighbor, a few doors down, will come over to my house to let me know that my car door is open in the yard, and he's worried about me. My neighbor behind me sent his boys over to our yard after Hurricane Ida to clean up while we were still evacuated. We care about community here. A sense of community lends itself to pride, and pride is what feeds the soul of New Orleans. Not all cities have a soul or a sense of identity, but New Orleans does, and that's why it's resilient.
Being from here and living in the greater New Orleans area my whole life, and since moving into the city, seeing the population shift after Katrina, especially in our neighborhood with lack of children, seeing the explosion of families staying in the city instead of leaving, and the city's investment in early childhood education, and kind of realizing that the way to make the future brighter is starting at the youngest age, is really having a positive impact. As a parent myself, seeing what that's doing for that generation is just creating exponential positivity in the city.
And I would say I'm very optimistic about the future stability of New Orleans in terms of all of our investments and green infrastructure, because one of the important things is living with water. And with climate change here, basically we're at a point now where these investments are going to pay off to ensure that the city doesn't flood as much and we're able to live in a stable and healthy environment.
Oh, well, as you know, New Orleans is like the most northern Caribbean city, so I don't think that's going to change. And so that's one of the things, is that it's so vibrant, so Caribbean-like, the people. But I'll say another thing is I work with kids, so for me, it's really the young people that we work with, and I see how great they are and how optimistic they are and their full potential, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be leading us and the next generation. So optimistic about that too. And in New Orleans, you know, every day is like being at the chef's table. You just never know what's going to come out and what's going to come your way, and it makes for some exciting days. And so that's what I think is just so great about our city, and I think won't change and will only get better.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of the city because, like a lot of people, I'm here by choice because they fell in love with the city at some point in their lives. And when you love something, you see it for what it really is, and you're unable to not see its good parts, and that keeps me optimistic.
So I think in the same way that people can hurt each other in relationships with one another, the city of New Orleans has made decisions that have hurt the landscape, and in turn, the landscape has made decisions that have traumatized New Orleans. So it makes me optimistic when I see people actively making decisions to reverse that cycle and choose to work with the landscape instead of overprotecting ourselves at its expense.
I am optimistic because I and most of, at this point, the people that I know who live here have chosen to make this their home and to live somewhere where everyone from everywhere else is telling you that your home doesn't have a future and is going to be underwater. You have to truly love where you are living. And just knowing that everyone else around me has that love for this place and is also optimistic gives me that optimism too.
I am optimistic about the future of this place because change and progress doesn't happen if you're not optimistic. Because you have to be hopeful for a future if you want to create a better future, if you want to have a future to begin with. So I don't see a time or place where New Orleans and people from New Orleans aren't going to put in the effort and like do the work and be here, and that's why I'm optimistic.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of New Orleans because it's honestly too valuable to lose. And I don't mean valuable economically or strategically. I mean, this place is the last bastion of irreverence and ridiculousness and intangibility. This world has become so quantifiable and data-driven that we need places that are undefinable and still, not to sound too emotional about it, but that places that have magic and that they're so rare anymore that we don't have any choice but to save this place and keep it going in perpetuity because it's the last of its kind in this country, and it may be the last of its kind anywhere in the near future. So this place has to be saved. And we have the tools and the will to do it. I think this exercise has shown me that people want this place to continue, and it's up to us to make that happen.
I'm optimistic about the long-term future of this place because throughout the production of this video and interviewing people and reaching out to different people throughout, I realize that there's a positivity that sometimes isn't always out there, that when you ask people why they're positive, it lets them truly give their opinion. And the joy that they express about this place and the love and the excitement for the future and the excitement for everything that we do here just comes out, and there's moments in hearing people talk about this place that can't help but make you smile and just be excited for the future. And that's why I'm optimistic.